Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, with the deadline for a framework agreement between Iran and world powers, CIA Director John Brennan says no matter the outcome of nuclear talks with Iran, the United States will continue to keep pressure on the country and learn from its past mistakes. In his speech before the left-leaning Jewish lobby gala in D.C., former Secretary of State James Baker uses harsh language to criticize Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for insufficient commitment to peace and an absolutist opposition to the Iran nuclear talks. And later on the show, the recent elections left Israel a divided country. Is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set to bridge the gaps? Good morning. I'm Yael Levi, and we begin today with Iran. A week from today, on March 31st, Iran is scheduled to sign a framework nuclear deal with world powers seeking to have international sanctions removed in exchange for curbing its nuclear program. But while its diplomats shuttle to Europe's capitals to sit around the negotiating table, Tehran's generals are busy tightening the Islamic Republic's grip on Arab states. From Iraq to Lebanon and Syria to Yemen, Iran, either directly or through its various proxies, is involved in nearly every conflict in the region. And as many critics would argue here in Israel, it is looking to carve out a new Shiite empire under the cover of negotiations. If so, what does that mean for world powers? What does that mean for the negotiations? And what does the world's sole superpower plan to do about it? That would be the United States. To help us answer these questions, we are joined in studio by Senior Research Fellow at the INSS, the head of the Middle East Military Balance Project there, Iftach Shapir. Iftach, good morning to you. And before, of course, also here is Lahav Arkov, the Jerusalem Post political reporter. Good morning to you, Lav. Good morning. Before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report about the upcoming deadline for a nuclear agreement, and then we'll expand the discussion.
The clock is ticking, but for some it ticks louder than for others. As the end of March deadline for a framework deal on the Iranian nuclear program draws near, Western powers met in London to assess the situation, with the Iran talks expected to resume later this week in Switzerland.
We're all agreed that we've made some very significant progress in some areas of those discussions, but there are other areas where we do not have agreement.
But behind the show of unity in London, there has been tension amongst the P5+1 countries, with France, to Washington's displeasure, demanding stricter restrictions on Iran. But the U.S. president has at least publicly lowered expectations once again.
Recent reports say that a draft is circulating, but there are other reports that says a sticking point remains over the pace of UN sanctions relief.
There is no deal until everything is worked out. And I think that it's premature to suggest that there's a draft out there.
Other points reportedly yet to be agreed include the actual length of the deal, as well as the number of nuclear sites that will be open to inspection. Iran's supreme leader has meanwhile offered an interesting take on the internal debate taking place in Washington.
These differences that you see among Americans, the U.S. senators on one side and the American government on the other, the opposite party of the government wishes that the points of these negotiations don't go to their rivals, the Democrats.
As March 31st approaches, some, including the French ambassador to Washington, have called into question the wisdom of such a public deadline. It seems not everyone feels the same sense of urgency.
Differences on some issues still remain that could have been resolved, but more time is needed.
There is little doubt in this case whose side time is on.
We're also joined on the phone by Reshet Bet Arab Affairs correspondent Eran Zinger. Eran, good morning to you. And also via Skype from Washington, D.C., Times of Israel political correspondent Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle. Rebecca, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us. Deadline approaching fastly, and I think all the statements coming out of D.C., coming out of the Secretary of State over the course of the last week, make it seem as if this deal with Iran, or actually the framework, the framework agreement is imminent. What are the reactions to that in D.C., and is it in fact a deadline that you believe is going to be met, given what's going on in D.C. right now?
Well, those are a good series of questions. I think that certainly in D.C., there is a certain amount of cynicism on the part of observers, simply because every other deadline for these talks has not yet been met. And so there is a certain amount of kind of, I wouldn't say light cynicism as to whether or not this deadline too would be met. On the other hand, the administration is certainly signaling, particularly the State Department, that we may be getting close, and that perhaps this political framework is more achievable than actually wrapping up all of the comprehensive talks by, say, the previous deadline. And so, yes, there is a chance that we're getting closer. The president, of course, is downplaying it at the same time that other people in the administration are boosting the signals that we're getting close to a deadline. So I would say with all of these mixed messages, chances are, yes, we are getting somewhere. The question is, how close are we? And there's multiple reports about what the sticking points are. Some people have said that the sticking points are about the UN sanctions. There appears to be another sticking point arising back to the issue of the centrifuges again. And of course, we're going to see what happens tonight with the big late-breaking story here in America, allegations that Israel spied on the U.S. negotiators during the Iran talks and then leaked that information to members of Congress. No. So it's going to be a busy week.
I want to talk to you a little bit just about that, because the Wall Street Journal is reporting about, obviously the Israeli Prime Minister's office has responded to the Wall Street Journal report that Israel spied on the talks and then used that information in order to actually build its case against the United States and Iran's deal. But the Wall Street, of course, the Prime Minister's office has denied all of those allegations. I'm wondering how much traction that's going to have in D.C. But in that respect, does Israel stand a chance, or is Congress still looking for the President of the United States to bring any type of deal into their attention and for them to sanction it, or is that not on the table at this point?
Well, I can say that it's most likely off the table for this political framework agreement that we expect by the end of the month. That is to say, the agreement that we expect by the end of the month is not intended to be a comprehensive agreement. There's still a lot of technical details that negotiators say will need to be worked out, even if an agreement is reached. And it looks like whatever the political framework will not be brought to Congress for any sort of approval or what seems to be likely disapproval in the coming weeks. What could happen, and what the White House has said, is that when there is a deal in hand, they will show the deal to Congress, and they will turn over to Congress basically all of the paperwork. They'll show to Congress all of the provisions of the deal. But the only time, from the White House's perspective, that Congress gets a yes or no on the deal as a whole will only be in the very distant future, when Congress will have to vote up or down the removal, not the temporary suspension, which is what we anticipate, as a result of a deal, but the actual removal of sanctions against Iran, which could be in another decade.
Which could be in another decade. Again, the sunset frame, so to speak. Rebecca, I hope you can stay with us as we move to the studio right now. The INSS, I want to ask you to begin with. Iran seems to, we started this segment by saying that Iran seems to have its hands in everything and anything in the Middle East at this point. There is an explosive report also this morning that obviously the Israeli Prime Minister's office is denying that Israel, in its attempts to try and stop that type of a deal, has spied on those talks. From what we know of the talks, from what researchers know and glean of the talks between the world powers and Iran, what is the big danger that Israel is so afraid of? That Iran is lying, or that there is no chance that it can be stopped 10 years from now? And well, is Israel really? I'm going to play devil's advocate. Was it also a lot of the campaigning line, maybe, for the Prime Minister of Israel, using Iran in his campaign towards elections in Israel?
Well, I don't want to comment about the Israeli internal politics. It's not my.
It's not your forte.
It's not
God knows whose forte it is.
my expertise. Yeah. Although I discuss it with my colleagues, like everybody else,
every Israeli,
with every taxi driver. I think the real problem with Israel is Israel historically never relied on deals. We don't believe the goyim, and it is very hard for me to see any agreement that Israel would see as satisfactory for its own security, because whatever the Iranians say, we are always very, very afraid that they might cheat, they might try to get the bomb anyway. And this is, I think this mistrust is very, very fundamental.
Right.
And I believe that all Israelis are part to that. And even if we had a prime minister or member of Meretz, he would also be inclined to inclined to mistrust a deal with Iran.
From the deal that is being shaped right now for the framework, from the details that we know within the deal?
I don't know much about the details, but obviously we are very aware, very wary of the fact that Iran might have allowable nuclear capability.
Oh, clearly. Clearly that is the main concern. Eran Singer, also of Reshet Bet in Israel, joining us on the phone, Arab Affairs correspondent. Eran, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
There you are. And just checking you, when it comes into, we started the segment by saying there's so many things on the table, the Iranian, the framework deal, but it seems also like Iran has its finger in every pie in the region. Is this a battle between Israel and Iran, or is Iran emerging? And this is what it's looking like. Is Iran emerging like the big power of the Middle East, and is that something Israel is ignoring or can't come to terms with?
Two major points here. The first one, Iran is using the vacuum that has been created in the last 3 or 4 years since the beginning of what we used to call the Arab Spring. Right. The Iranians are everywhere. We have two major powers today working in the region, and ISIS is the smaller one. Iran is the bigger one. Iran is the most, or the more dangerous one. Iran is getting into all the areas where the Arab state, or the what we call the Arab state nation, has collapsed. This is where the Iranians are getting into, and what Israel is saying. And the thing is, the critical point is that Israel is saying, and it's not only Israel, it's also some of the Arab Sunni states like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states. They are saying that look what the Iranians are doing right now. Just imagine what would have happened if the Iranians had a nuclear capability. This is one thing. The other thing is, and I think it's another concern, not only of Israel's, but also of the Arab nations or the Arab countries. It's the fact that they are afraid that the Americans and the Iranians are trying to reach the deal that everyone was trying to say that there isn't. And I mean that the same deal in which the Iranians will have the nuclear capability or the nuclear facilities that they want to have so much, and the Americans and the superpowers will give the Iranians, or will ask the Iranians to rule the region. And this is a major thing here, because once the Americans have decided that there's no longer any possibility that American forces, American troops will be in Afghanistan or in Iraq, and also in Syria, someone has to be here, the sheriff. Someone has to take the responsibility of a regional sheriff. This is what the Americans are expecting the Iranians to do. The Iranians have sold the idea that they are capable of ruling or of being a local police in the region once the Americans are not here anymore, once the American foreign policy is saying that there is no need for American troops in the region. So this is another concern. It's not only the bomb, it's the whole idea that there is one winner.
Who's the new sheriff? Who's the new sheriff of the Middle East in many ways?
Yeah, this is the thing here. So, and now the question is, and it's not only a question that is being raised by Israel, it's mostly by the Gulf states and some other allies of the U.S. They're asking the U.S. or the White House, and especially the State Department, they're asking them, are you sure that after all we had here, and especially after your failure in dealing with the Arab Spring, are you sure that the only way of treating the outcome of the Arab Spring is letting Iran handle things? This is the problem here.
No, fascinating point at that. Iran, do stay with us. And Iftach, I want to ask you, Saudi Arabia and Iran, this is a battle actually between these big two countries when it comes to the region, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. I mean, the Saudis and even more, actually all the Gulf states are very, very wary of Iran. Very, very. I mean, if you look in Riyadh and you see the Iranians in Yemen, in Bahrain, in Iraq. But on the other hand, let me look at. I would like to look at it from another side, from the other way around. If you're sitting in Tehran, how do you see the world? And I don't think anybody in Tehran ever sat to the table and said, okay, we are going to reincarnate the Sassanid Empire. We are going to create a Shiite empire all over the Middle East. I don't think that was the case. I think they are reacting.
As many in Israel would like to say, as many political pundits in Israel would like to say. Okay, no.
But I think they are reacting to the situation which, again, if you sit in Tehran, the world around you is very, very threatening. You have the Americans in the Gulf and in Iraq and in the former Soviet Union states and Central Asia. You have extreme Sunnis in Iraq and in Syria. The world is very threatening, and they are reacting. And they are reacting through the local Shiites, which are their natural allies, and they are doing it well. And yes, I think
Mr. Singer.
What Singer said was very right. They are becoming the sheriff because there is no one else.
There's no one else. There's
there
the
is
vacuum.
no one else.
I mean, I think that's a terrifying notion to the state of Israel. And Rebecca, that brings it to you so I can release you quickly to go back to bed. But Rebecca, in terms of the United States, is there a notion, actually, in back doors in D.C., that, indeed, the U.S. has picked Iran as the new sheriff of the region in many ways, or has resorted itself to the idea that that is the player that can help control the ground?
Well, I think there's overt concern here in Washington that that may, in fact, be the case. And we saw statements coming out recently by General Petraeus and by a number of people warning the administration that Iran is the real danger in the region and not, say, ISIS. And I think that that warning would not be perceived to be necessary if, in fact, there was not a sense that the administration did think that perhaps Iran could be an asset, perhaps not an ally, but at least an enemy of an enemy that could get work done. And so, yes, I think that there is a certain amount of concern here in Washington that that could be an emerging understanding here with the administration.
Within the administration. Rebecca Shimoni-Stoll, thank you so much for joining us from Washington. Iftach, same to you. Thank you for being with us this morning as we move along. And we are moving along to, of course, the saga of the Jewish lobby in the United States. There's no secret that Israel has long been a standing ally of the United States. But that said, in the recent weeks, in the recent months that led up to the Israeli elections, it has become a very divisive argument within the Jewish community in the United States. Case in point, the Israeli Prime Minister's speech, Netanyahu's speech in front of Congress just shortly before the elections in Israel, and as of last night, also, the J Street lobby that was meeting in D.C., where both former Secretary of State James Baker gave a speech that was very, very, very harsh, using very harsh words against Prime Minister Netanyahu, as the Chief of Staff of the White House, Mr. McDonough. But let's have a listen first to what Mr. James Baker, the former Secretary of State in the United States under George H. Bush, he was the former Secretary of State, Lav, help me out here, under George Bush, right? But the first Bush, exactly, the father. He gave a speech last night at J Street in front of that gala and had the following things to say about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
In the aftermath of Netanyahu's recent election victory, the chance of a two-state solution appears even slimmer, of course, given his reversal on the issue on the eve of Israel's elections last week. Remember, 3 months after he first took office as his country's prime minister in 2009, Netanyahu shared his vision for a two-state solution. Since then, his actions have not matched his rhetoric, as settlement construction has continued. Settlement construction has continued unabated, and last week, under intense political strain, he announced his opposition to a two-state solution. Now, even though he attempted to back away from his statement 2 days later, I think we would all agree that the short-term prospect for such a solution obviously remains quite bleak.
Okay, we are joined in studio by Lavragov of the Jerusalem Post, diplomatic correspondent. Good morning to you, and thank you for being with us. And of course, by Jake, war chapter as well, I-24 News contributor. Jake, good morning.
Good morning, Al.
Yes, this is the discussion about the Jewish lobby in the States and Netanyahu's apparent pact with the Republican Party. I'm going to start with you, actually, Lav. And by their shared benefactor, casino mogul Sheldon Adelson, is countered by the massive financial support of wealthy liberal Jews for the Democrats, which is, I think, something that we saw yesterday with J Street, okay, with the meeting in D.C. But, you know, nowhere can that split be more, you know, evident in the J Street conference yesterday. But I'm wondering out loud with you, when we see James Baker on stage, basically, you know, criticizing Netanyahu in very, very harsh words, as well as the chief of staff of the White House, Mr. McDonough, coming up and saying that Netanyahu is not to be trusted. Where does it put the Jewish community in the United States? The Jewish lobby that is very powerful when it comes to American politics. Where are those, you know, and what does that mean for the upcoming elections in the U.S., which I think is something that everybody in the Jewish lobby and in Israel is looking at?
Well, first of all, I want to correct you. It's the Israel lobby and not
the Israel
Jewish
lobby. You are right. Please do.
Also, just about James Baker, I wouldn't be surprised about anything he says against Israel or even the harshness of his words, because this is the man who famously said, F the Jews, they don't vote for us anyway. So this is probably one of the most famous things James Baker said.
Okay.
And so the minute I heard that he...
But he also is the man who picked up a sign back in the Madrid conference, or before the Madrid conference, and said, you know, Mr. Shamir, this is the number of the White House. Give us a call if you want peace.
Sure,
yes.
But clearly he has a very cynical view on the situation, if that's his, you know, famous quote about American Jews in Israel. And so when I heard that he was the keynote speaker at the J Street conference, I thought that maybe this is an indication of J Street's general direction. And I think it's sort of unfortunate that they chose someone who had such harsh words to say about the Jews.
But he's also a man who's helping Jeb Bush actually in his campaign. He's also helping the Republican Party in his campaign in 2016.
Well, he's a Republican.
Exactly. I'm saying so. I mean.
Right. I mean, it wasn't always the case that the Republican Party was seen by many as, you know, the pro-Israel party, and it's unfortunate that it's the case that there's any party that's the pro-Israel party, because we want bipartisan relations, and I think that's where your question comes in. You know, I think that it's true, the majority of Jewish voters vote Democrat. There's an increasing number of Republican voting Jewish people in recent years. You know, I think that, though, the split in American Jewry on Israel isn't as drastic as people make it out to be.
Is it all Israeli media? No, I'm asking seriously.
No, I don't think it's all Israeli media either, but when you look at numbers and polling numbers, it's more about, say, people's connection to Israel decreasing than people actually going to J Street. I don't think that J Street is representative of such a huge swath of American Jewry.
I'm not sure I agree with you. I think that there are plenty of polls out there saying that the majority of American Jews are in favor of a two-state solution.
But AIPAC doesn't oppose it.
And then about AIPAC not opposing a two-state solution, the problem is that AIPAC is so identified with the government in Israel. And the government in Israel, we can't really say has actively pursued a two-state solution, to put it mildly, over the course of the years of the Netanyahu administration. And there's frustration in large segments of the American Jewish community, not only with the political direction of the Netanyahu government, but there are questions about sort of the ethical and the moral and the value judgments that are there. So, for instance, almost more important, I think, than the J Street conference this weekend and the expected criticism of Israel's failure to pursue two-state solutions is you had the Rabbinical Assembly, and you had the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the two largest denominations, conservative and reform rabbis, calling out Netanyahu on the Arab voters coming out to vote in droves thing. And this gets to the thing that we were talking about last week about the role of racism or the role of race politics in American thinking and political thought. And so, you know, I think the alienation among American Jewish leadership with the Israeli government is at an all-time high, and I wouldn't say that it's being overstated.
Well, I'm sorry, Matt, J Street specifically. There's a difference between advocating a two-state solution and not necessarily supporting Netanyahu, and J Street, which essentially called for a boycott of half of Israel in its conference yesterday. They said anything over the green line you shouldn't buy.
Settlements?
No, but hold on.
They're talking about, that you should boycott Jerusalem because they're talking about anything over the green line. They're talking about you should boycott Modi'in, which was in the no man's land. You're talking about a lot of land that, to the average Israeli, is never going to be, a Palestinian state. And I found that, frankly, quite shocking yesterday. I mean, they were calling for a boycott, and that's not something that you generally hear from someone you would consider Israel's allies.
A valid point, but we have to also remember that one of the key speakers there was the White House chief was Mr. McDonough. Okay, let's start from that. I'm having one heck of a morning here. And Mr. McDonough, the following thing that he had to say in J2, first of all, the fact that he was a guest, okay, the fact that he was a guest and keynote speaker, speaks volumes to the fact that Israel has become very much a bipartisan, divisive issue in the United States, and also within the Jewish community, so it seems, in the United States. But let's hear what he had to say yesterday in front of the J Street conference.
After the election, the Prime Minister said that he had not changed his position. But for many in Israel and in the international community, such contradictory comments call into question his commitment to a two-state solution, as did his suggestion that the construction of settlements has a strategic purpose of dividing Palestinian communities, and his claim that conditions in the larger Middle East must be more stable before a Palestinian state can be established. We cannot simply pretend that these comments were never made. A two-state solution will finally bring Israelis the security and normalcy to which they are entitled, and Palestinians the sovereignty and dignity they deserve.
In the minute that we have left, Dennis McDonough speaking that way. But Lavan, let's start with you real quickly, because you are a political correspondent. Is Netanyahu hearing that? That is not a good sign. I mean, we know that it's an all-time low, the relationship with the White House, but still.
I think he's hearing it. It's not a good sign, but I also think that he's been hearing it from other people in the past few days. So I don't necessarily think that McDonough's speech is the marking of the low point, because all of the messages.
No, clearly the low point has been marked several weeks ago.
And well, we didn't see his full speech just now. I just want to point out that it's all about the Israelis. It's apparently in his eyes and perhaps the Obama administration's eyes, the Palestinians are not at fault and they have no agency here, which I think is unfortunate because it takes two to tango.
But that's quickly.
Absolutely, but I would say that the main thing here is a complete breakdown of trust in the relationship. And the story in the Wall Street Journal today talking about Israeli spying on the negotiations, and then we have the undermining going directly of that intelligence spin to the Republicans. We understand the context why the White House is so angry with Netanyahu.
And time will tell how will this evolve. Is it all rhetoric, or is it heading towards some sort of a change in relationship? We'll let you know when we get back. Obviously, first the news. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this March. Ruthie, help me out.
24.
Thank you. 2015.
I learned it by heart.
By heart. March 24th, 2015. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place you should be, because yes, it is the place where on occasion you open your television set and you see a studio full of women. There we go. Yay. There's Ruthie Sinai, I-24 News Senior News Editor, and Karen Kirsch of I-24 News Magazine. Mama, I don't even know how to define you other than my feminist guru. So there we have it. We're going to start with anything and everything you've missed while scanning the headlines, and that would be Ruthie Sinai's job.
Okay, so Yael, you remember last week we had elections in Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu, on the day of the elections, this is a Tuesday, remember that Tuesday, came out and said, come to the polls. The right wing is losing. The Arabs are coming to the polls in droves.
And the left wingers are putting them on buses.
Yeah. Okay. So turns out, according to the Times of Israel, that Netanyahu's pollster is a fellow by the name of John McLaughlin, who is a well-known Republican pollster in the States, came out in an interview yesterday with a New York radio station and said, Not so. On Sunday already we had polls showing that the Likud was ahead, that they would garner 23% of the votes, which is exactly what happened. 30 seats in the Knesset translates to 23% of the votes. And none of this was a big surprise to us. We knew this on Sunday. Again, Tuesday, the elections. So this whole last-minute panic, when, you know...
Whole last-minute panic where all, you know, the interesting bit of that, you know, if you looked at social networks throughout that day, when he was coming out with that statement, people were saying he's panicking, he's panicking. Mm-hmm. Does the article claim what was the agenda behind that mass panicking campaign, even if they had the information that the Likud was ahead?
No, it doesn't go into that. It just describes the situation. But he does, you know, he's quite certain that those were the figures on Sunday night. You know?
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I mean, again, politically speaking, I could never be a player, but, you know, it's the house of cards, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on.
Bibi Underwood. Okay.
Bibi Underwood. Yes.
Okay. To Singapore. We're going there with the New York Times, which tells us about teary mourners in Singapore remembering Lee Kuan Yew. For those of you younger than myself who don't know who Lee Kuan Yew is, he ruled Singapore from 1959 to 1990, and not just ruled it, he built it. He made it what it is today. Yeah. He was, you know, on the one hand, a visionary, who took his people out of poverty. On the other hand, he was a tyrant, a lot of human rights abuses, no opposition. And he was quite clear about it. He said, you know, if I am to get a handle on all this disparate group of Malaysians and Chinese and all these, you know, different ethnic groups, I need to be strong. I need to rule with an iron hand. He was quite open about it. His son is the prime minister now. People very teary. And there's a wonderful quote in this New York Times story from a fellow who was asked about this guy, you know, about Lee Kuan Yew's human rights violations, and he says, as long as you're economically well off with housing and food, who cares about the politics? So that's one way of looking at it.
How very, very, very indicative of things that happen in this world this world today. Yes. Okay.
So same part of the world, Afghanistan. Horrible, horrible story, as brought to us by The Independent. It's been elsewhere. So here's the story. This 27-year-old theology student woman had gone up to a group of men selling charms, and she was exhorting the women who were standing there not to buy these charms, basically saying this is voodoo. The men got, you know, upset with her. They stoned her to death. They took her up on a roof. They threw her off the roof, and then they ran her over with a car. Claiming that she had tried to burn the Quran, when in fact what she probably did was try to burn one of these charms. Anyway, in a break with tradition...
Or have an opinion.
Yeah. In a break with tradition, the pallbearers at the funeral were all women, you know, very angry women. This is unheard of in Afghanistan, where men are always pallbearers. And this has shaken...
I mean, I can't even call this a silver lining when you see women in Afghanistan, you know, breaking from tradition, doing that, because the act itself is so horrific.
Horrific,
but,
unbelievable.
Yeah, horrific, but, you know, at least still standing up after something like that maybe gives one a little bit of hope. Yes.
And speaking of a little bit of hope and women, we have this story from Al Arabiya, one of my favorite sites, which talks about Egyptian President Al-Sisi. Here we go, rewarding or giving an award to a woman who for 46 years dressed as a man so that she could work. So that she could shine shoes, so that she could clean toilets, so that she could pick fruit and
feed her family and herself.
And feed her. Yeah, she found herself at the age of 21 with a baby and a widow. Her husband had passed away. Women were not supposed to work in Egypt
at the time.
She could have gone out to beg, but she, you know, strangely decided she wanted to work instead.
Shocking.
And in order to do that, you know, she put on this large galabiya and, you know, basically a turban, a man's turban. And,
you know, in the dark, stark situation that many people in Egypt are facing today, what I do like about it is exactly what you said, that Sisi is honoring her.
Yeah.
That this is being given, you know, this is sanctioned. You know,
and the prize is either some money or an all expenses paid trip to Mecca for a pilgrimage. I don't know. I'm not sure what she chose.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And? Okay. Daily Mail tells us an interesting story about a frozen mummy. a Buddha, 1,000 years old, whom the Chinese are now claiming was stolen from some village temple. And in fact, this mummy, which, by the way, a CT showed that all its inner organs had been removed 1,000 years ago.
Sorry,
anyway,
doesn't one have to do that in order to be mummified?
It's reasonable.
All the internal organs. Okay. Well, anyway, what they found was
sounds like
Karen and I being very, being experts on mummifying things.
Taxidermists too. So what they found in the CT scan was these little notes where the organs were, and the notes are all in Chinese. Anyway, so this frozen mummy.
I left my Chinese cookie inside. Okay, but
anyway, this mummy ended up on display at the Hungarian Natural History Museum.
Now that's the funny thing.
And why the Hungarian? Because it's owned by a Dutch collector who has some Hungarian connections, and it's on display there. Anyway, they've taken it off the display now that the Chinese are claiming this.
They're claiming it back.
Mummy, they want it back. So.
I wasn't mummified to end up in Hungary. Okay.
I know, exactly.
Yes,
okay.
One last one.
One last one. The BBC tells us that the Ebola outbreak, remember Ebola, 10,000 people killed, etc., dead, dying, it's going to be over by August.
They suggest.
They suggest.
They
yes.
suggest.
As we
say in the
headlines,
they suggest. They don't claim
maybe
they
yes,
suggest.
Maybe more.
No, but there is a glimmer of hope there. I mean, we do. Let's hope so. And it's good to follow up on a story that really dominated the news just a few months ago.
Yeah.
Ruthie Sinai, thank you. I'm locking you in studio because I love having so many women around me as we move along. In a world where women are subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable in conflict zones, including places like Nigeria, where just last week dozens of so-called wives of Boko Haram jihadists were slain to prevent them from remarrying infidels, it was Israel that was signaled out on Friday by the UN Commission on the status of women for blocking the advancement of Palestinian women living under occupation. The Commission voted on a resolution criticizing Israel on the last day of the Commission's two-week meeting. It was the only resolution passed referencing a country by name. The vote was immediately rebuffed by Israel, with its UN ambassador Ron Prosser calling it further proof of the UN's bias against Israel. Now, to discuss this highly sensitive issue, we are joined in studio by I-24 News editor Karen Kirsch. Karen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Of course, Ruthie's still with us. First, let's take a look at what Israeli Council for Human Rights, Nelly Shiloh, had to say in response to the resolution. Let's have a listen.
Remember this date, March 20, 2015. Today, the CSW will probably end its annual most important meeting by singling out Israel. Again, what a way to mark 20 years since the Beijing Declaration. The goal of this forum is to advance the rights and interests of women around the world through productive and professional dialogue. However, it seems that the sponsors of this resolution would sooner score cheap political points than address the important subject at hand. Singling out Israel for condemnation among all nations of the Middle East and the nations of the world is not only unfair, it's absurd. For all these reasons, Israel has called for a vote on this resolution and will vote against it. Madam Chair.
Karen, yes.
Yes.
Sponsored by the Palestinians and the South Africans, the only resolution that was passed.
I'm actually going to explain a bit of UN diplomacy. And I'm not exactly sure if this is sort of, we can talk about the substance also if we get there.
Let's look at UN diplomacy.
But the UN diplomacy is interesting. CSW, or the Commission on the Status of Women, is a gathering, an annual gathering of grassroots and NGOs. That's done once a year.
Right.
And this one was celebrating the first one 20 years ago. It really usually has a proper resolution that's discussed during the annual conference, but this year they didn't have it. They actually drafted the resolution in January before the actual...
They slapped it all together in a hurry.
But the interesting thing is that the Palestinian Authority, since they don't have standing in the UN, they actually get their opportunity to present the status of women in the CSW and not where countries are presenting their annual reports, and they have a special standing, and that's why since last year when it started, they get these sort of headlines. And it's very interesting because the actual Commission on the Status of Women of Countries is conducted in Geneva once a year. And that's a place that gets a lot less attention than the UN in New York.
So yes, it gets the headline, but at the end of the day, the status of, first of all, the status of Palestinian women, any woman, any person under occupation, clearly, and women in societies are always in a status lesser than men, clearly is lesser than, there is an issue there.
There is an issue. Women have all through the years have been, bearing the toll. Palestinian women have been bearing the toll of occupation more than men. We can't really ignore that they exit less, they suffer more, like we know everywhere else. When you're suffering from food shortage,
medical
shortage.
supplies, whatnot. So we can see women in conflict zones.
It always goes to women. But the interesting thing is when we talk about the diplomacy part is that last year the statement was much worse, and Israel didn't make a deal of it, so nobody's heard about it. And this year, it was Israel who put it in the headlines.
In the headlines, baby, it completely rebuffing it immediately.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, I'm wondering with my fellow colleague women here around this table, when it comes to the women themselves, be a case in point, the Palestinian women, these resolutions, they don't really do anything.
Yeah, and I was actually speaking yesterday to a friend who was there in the CSW, and she said, specifically this one that was marking sort of like the big one 20 years ago where Hillary Clinton made the statement of women's rights as human rights and very big, important. She said it was ceremonial. Since the resolution was actually sort of drafted before and has no teeth.
No, ceremonial is the key point. I think that's a very good word to use. And has this become in the UN, have women issues, just to veer slightly away from that, become ceremonial and kind of the token headline, the token resolution that we're going to pass that nobody implements.
And the interesting thing is that it's been the UN has been leading this sort of campaign for 20 years and not much has happened in these past 20 years.
Can I interfere?
Please.
Of course you can.
I'm sitting here thinking...
I'm sitting here listening, and I'm going, listen, ceremonial, bureaucracy, diplomacy, I don't care, and you guys know my views, and for those of you who don't, I am... Never mind.
No,
we know. The point being that it is unfair, and it makes me angry for Israel to be singled out on the status of women when there are so many other countries who are so much worse. And in the press review we just did, we mentioned at least one of them where women are burned and so on. I mean, come on. Isn't there? I mean, this is like... No, wait a minute. One more sentence. If I thought it did any good for women...
And that's the point. Ceremonial, etc. It doesn't do any good for women. It's, as you said, diplomacy. It's singling out Israel, and it's no secret. No matter what government I think stands in the helm of Israel, the UN at the end of the day is going to lean against the country. Okay, that's what it feels like.
Even giving that sort of standing in a place that you get more attention is kind of it's making a stand. Like you say, the actual diplomatic move makes a stand.
I'm just looking at women again yet being used as diplomatic capitalist, diplomatic. That's my problem with this. Just being used as something, a fight between big companies, big countries, and men, exactly. And there we said, so you're using these women who are already in, disadvantaged situations, less than, as you said, and I agree completely, in places like Afghanistan, where they're killed for, having an opinion. Then there we have that. But okay, I'm angry now.
And still, and the whole convention didn't bring that much, didn't bring that much new stuff. And that much new policy and sort of it's really kind of you see the UN moving back and forth. They did this whole initiative with Uber, who was supposed to provide I don't remember how many thousands of jobs around the world, and
the name Uber is already problematic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of really sort of strange things.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing the Oscar music, fascinating points all around, and with you, of course. Thank you for putting me in my place. When we get back, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu apologizes to the Arab community in Israel, or does he, trying to heal the rift left behind by a vicious election season? We'll Good morning. I-24 News Morning Edition on this March 24th, 2015. This is still the morning edition. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Levi. And yes, Israel is still settling from the dust of the elections. So speaking of the elections, the recent elections in Israel left behind a deeply divided country. 3 months of polarization by political leaders eager to draw voters into their camps produced or perhaps only revealed a society splitting at the seams. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, at the urging of the president, took the first step towards bridging the divide last night in the form of an apology to Arab citizens for his election day rallying call to his supporters, deemed by many as racist. But the rifts run deep, and it is not clear that words alone can heal them at this stage. And to discuss the issue, we are joined in studio by Professor of Political Science at the Israel Valley College, Dr. Hani Zubaydah. Dr. Zubaydah, good morning to you.
Al.
And, of course, also with us is the director of the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism, Reform Rabbi and attorney, Gilad Kariv. Boker Tov. Good morning to you, still in English. Let's first take a look at Ayman Siksak's report about the division within Israeli society and break it down from there.
While the government which will be formed will have been elected by a majority of Israeli citizens, it must provide an answer to the needs of all the citizens of Israel.
As Israeli leaders arrive Monday to the president's Jerusalem residence for consultations on the soon-to-be-formed government, Rivlin touched on a raw nerve in the public debate: the majority in Israel and its wishes. But who is the majority, and what views does it represent? The answer depends on who you ask.
Although Israel was founded based on the historic Jewish homeland and the need to have a Jewish homeland, Israeli democracy has been premised on everybody in the country being treated equally and fairly.
Days after Benjamin Netanyahu's warning that Arab voters are flocking to the polls, it seems divisive rhetoric is quickly becoming a unifying tool for the Israeli thinkers and policymakers. In another controversial post on Facebook, Israeli professor Amir Chetzroni lamented the immigration of Middle Eastern Jews to Israel, blaming them for Netanyahu's stay in power. The post only highlighted the divide between Mizrahi and Ashkenazi Jews in the recent round of elections. Newly reinstated Shas leader Aryeh Deri staged his return to politics largely on encouraging Mizrahi Jews to vote for a Mizrahi leader, capitalizing on sentiments of discrimination within the Mizrahi community. But the Israeli periphery has also come under criticism, following relatively high voting rates for the ruling Likud party, invoking tension also between classes.
Dr. Hani Zubaydah, I want to start with you, not touching specifically about, internally the Israeli society at just this case, because I want to go back to a bit of news that came in over last night, and that is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu coming out. Some say that he apologized, some say that he regretted. There's the semantics of the lingo. And Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday essentially regretting the statement that he made during the Israeli elections. Let's have a listen what he had to say with a meeting of some of the Arab leaders of the country yesterday late evening in terms of what regretting what he said during the elections.
I know the things I've said a few days ago offended Israeli Arabs. It wasn't my intention. I'm sorry for that. My actions as a prime minister, which include vast investments in the minority sector, are proof of my real intentions. I do think that no outside factors should interfere with our own democracy. I see myself as the prime minister of each and every one of you, of all Israeli citizens, regardless of religion, race, or sex. This is how it's always been and will remain this way. I view you as partners for a strong and united Israel, acting on the behalf of all its citizens.
I want to start first of all with reactions to that statement. Dr. Zubaydah, is this something that is going to help bridge the divide when it comes to Israel's Arab citizens?
Well, call me naive or call me stupid, but I really, really want to believe that what he said will be the opening gate for his actions, because I think that action speaks louder than words, and I hope that he's going to do what I think he will do, and I think he's going to start with a huge pack of investments within the Arab community. I think what he did came out of distress, and I think it was stupid, it was non-democratic, it was racist. If I was an Israeli Arab, I would have been offended deeply. I think that it wasn't called for. I think he kind of like realized it. As a prime minister, I think right now he needs to make amends and he needs to fix fences. And I think that the best way to do it right now is starting with this, but then immediately start investing in the Arab population, because I think the problem right now, the divide between the Israeli and the Arabs, is the fact that the infrastructure within the Arab community, all the infrastructures, education, sewage, employment, and so on, all of them are really in a bad shape. And I think he's the guy who has his coalition, homogenic, rightist coalition, and he can and he should fix this, well, historical travesty.
Now, when it comes to historical travesty, though, when we're looking at that, and Rabbi Kariv helped me out in that respect, it was a terrible statement to be said. There are people, though, that will argue that yesterday that regret, the regret or, the apology that he gave was not in front of the right people, that not all the leaders of the Arab community were there.
I think it's more than that. While I welcome the Prime Minister's statement, and I think it was the right thing to do, it's also important to remember two things. One, he continued with the delegitimization of the elected political leaders of the Arab community. I don't understand how they assembled this group of people. The Israeli Palestinians or the Arab Israeli Knesset members were not invited. Right. The leaders of the new joint faction were not invited. And more than that, during his statement, he continued to blame the left parties with a welcoming overseas intervention in the campaign. So while he apologized in front of a selected group of Israeli Arabs, he continued with this ongoing incitement against the legitimate political actions of the other side of the political map. So I do want to believe that maybe we see the emerge of an understanding that some red lines were crossed in the last campaign. But we need the most serious decision of the Prime Minister and other political leaders that the Israeli society cannot maintain this high level of political incitement, this high level of political violence, and I'm not so sure that the lesson was well learned.
I want to, then I'm going to turn to the optimist around the table, and that is Dr. Zubaydah. And I'm wondering with you, what can he do, and because the divide within the Israeli society, and we've all been witnessing that over the course of the last several days, it's Israeli citizens versus Israeli Arab citizens. It's of the Ashkenaz persuasion versus the Sephardic persuasion. It's of the right and left. What can he do to bridge it? And has he not burned his his capital of trust when it comes to the population of Israel?
Well, I think there's a problem here. You left out gender, you left out race, you left out urban versus non-urban, Orthodox versus secular. There's so many cleavages. Israeli society is so heterogenic that it kind of like begs the question of when will the next explosion happen? But here goes. We have to believe in our leaders. He is the elected prime minister. This is the first time in 2 decades that a prime minister from any bloc gets his own coalition, which is completely heterogenic, completely right. He has 61 seats and he has a party to spare. Now, he can go right now and dive into the issues that are at the core of the problem of the Israeli society. I agree with Rabbi Kariv, and I agree that this was a very, how should I say it, very diplomatic, non-apology exactly. Without really apologizing. But I want to believe in the good nature of people. And I'm saying that because I fear that the Israeli society is on the verge of an explosion. I believe that the Israeli society lacks the ability of compassion, lacks the ability to see the other. I hear people seeing Rabbi Kariv, and he has a yarmulke on his head, I can see people while he walks down the street, and people behind him will say slurs on him without even knowing who the man is. Right. And that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing in a society.
But then there's the argument that this is exactly how the Prime Minister of Israel won his elections.
Well,
with that type of animosities.
Well, let me start by saying that I've been sitting in this studio for the past 2 months and saying that this is the worst campaign I have ever seen. In the United States, we have, like, when we discuss the issue of campaigns, there is the notion of going negative. Right. You know that you go negative, you climb up the points, and then at a certain point you flat out, and then you start declining. In Israel, unfortunately, this election is an anomaly, because what we saw is throughout the campaign only negative campaigning. If somebody can really tell me, what did the Prime Minister or the opposition leader promised or said to the public in favorable terms, I would be happy, because I heard none. This is why I think that it trickles from the top to the bottom, and they need to understand they have a responsibility. They need to maintain their responsibility. They are public advocates and public delegates, and they need, well, let me rephrase, they must rethink which type of society they want for our children, not our children. And I want my children to play with Rabbi Kariv's children, and to play with Muhammad's children, and to play with all the children, regardless of who they are, and think about them as human beings. And if we will not do that, I truly believe that we are kind of like progressing towards a cliff, which we will not be able to stop. This is a point of no return.
You know, the argument, and very, very valid points, and Rabbi Karim asking, the argument that Israelis always used against Palestinians or about Palestinians is basically, thank God they hate each other more than they hate us. And there is a feeling that the Israeli society is about to, or is heading towards the way of actually fulfilling that same slogan in many ways. Now, when I'm looking at, you know, the election results, and as Dr. Zubaydah said, the rift, the division within the people, you yourself ran for, you know, for a seat within the Labour Party camp. Is there an understanding within the opposition that they need, you know, in many ways also to assist heal the wounds? And how can they do that with the division between right and left as it looks right now?
First of all, it's important to say that during the campaign, we saw some troubling phenomena, not only in the right side of the political map. We all remember the rally in Kikar Rabin, in the Rabin Square in Tel Aviv, and the offending comments of one of the leading cultural figures in Israel against the Orthodox community, the Sephardic community, Yair Garbuz, and we need to accept the fact that this troubling phenomena doesn't belong only to the Likud and to the right-wing parties. And in that regard, I think that the Israeli society in large, and not only the Jewish sector, also the Israeli-Palestinian or the Israeli-Arab sector, we are lacking two things. One is the ability to criticize ourselves. You know, let's talk about the Palestinian joint faction to the Knesset. The head of their PR unit during the campaign said that ISIS learned their tactics from the Zionist movement. The leaders of the joint faction refused to go against this statement. This is something that cannot be accepted. If you expect the prime minister not to offend the Arab minority in Israel, and vice versa. And we are lacking this ability to amend our camp and to have self-criticism. And the second thing, and here is something about the role of the media. You know, there is a traditional expression in Hebrew, sinat chinam, like you have free love, you have free hate. And our tradition is saying that the reason the Second Temple was destroyed is because of free hate. The hate in Israel is not a free hate. It's an ideological, cultural hate.
And that's the terrifying thing.
But you can understand the expression free hate as if no one is attaching a price tag to the hate. And we are allowing those people that are leading this campaign of hate not to pay a price. And the media is playing a role here. We need to take a decision. that those people that do not set red lines to their expressions and actions cannot become leading figures in the public discourse in Israel. And without doing it, we will...
no, we'll have to Dr. Zubayda's 2 seconds.
Sure.
Really
I think one last issue. We need to think really hard about the Israeli educational system because everything stems from there.
Yes. No, completely.
And the fact that it is segregated.
And to compete the segregation.
Yes, exactly.
Completely. Gentlemen, that was a fascinating discussion. I hope people were listening to us and things will change. Thank you for being with us. We are going to go back to the news. Stay with us. When we get back, something slightly lighter. Culture, films. So stick around. I-24 News, March 24th, 2015. This is your morning edition, the place you should be to start your day, because once again, in this part of the show, I'm sitting with just women in the studio, which in of itself is a wonderful thing in the world of television.
That's true.
So I've got Laetitia Loeni with your film update, the most important thing, and Ronnie Stav with anything and everything you needed to know about pop culture and India.
And India.
First of all,
let's just talk about that, please.
No, let's meditate. Come on, let's meditate. Ronnie Stav, back from India. We had no pop culture, cultural news.
No pop culture.
Nothing.
That's
nothing.
So upsetting.
Yeah, because
there's
you were
a
doing
couple
like
of other
Zen and
upsetting
yoga.
things, but it's okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And what do you have for us?
So we start with kind of an upsetting news, but the British singer-songwriter Jackie Trent died at the age of 74. She is known for the hits.
It's my party. No.
No, not
Sorry,
this one.
my
But
mistake.
Where
I
Are
just
You
killed
Now?
somebody else. Okay.
But the theme song of Neighbours, the Australian soap Neighbours. That's the one.
Of course. Okay, yes.
Of course, that one.
Yeah, oh my
We
God.
totally forgot about that one.
And what else?
And Where Are You Now? Yeah. Where Are You Now? What?
Sing.
No,
Sing
we're
it.
not going to sing right now. But we can all later on YouTube her and
Ronnie Stav
discover.
returned from India very decisive. It's like, no, we're not singing. That's not happening. Okay, yes.
So her and her ex-husband, Tony Hatch, they wrote material for Shirley Bassey, Vicky Kerr, Des O'Connor, Nancy Williamson, Dean Martin, and so many more.
She's an institution in the
She
world
is.
of
She is. They wrote
songwriting.
more than 400 songs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are institution. And last year, she advised 2 writers producing a musical based on her yet to be published autobiography. So looks like we're gonna get a little more of her, and then we'll actually know what she did after Neighbours and before Neighbours and all that.
And then there'll be a biopic.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a biopic.
And there's gonna be a biopic. Yeah, totally. So rest in peace.
Definitely.
Yes.
Rest
in peace, Jackie Trent. And celebrity chef Pete Evans looks like he's trying to kill your babies. Everyone's babies. That's the word in the street.
And here he is with a big knife.
There's no baby in the end of the knife, but looks like it's kind of
after the baby diet controversy.
Yes. Okay. So
tell me
he's
about
like,
the baby diet.
Okay. So he's huge about the paleo diet. It's called the caveman diet. It allows poultry, fish, eggs, fruit, vegetables, and lots of meat. And it's banning grains and dairy completely.
Okay.
So
grains and dairy out.
Out. Completely
You
out.
only live on protein.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And looks like people are not excited about it. He's like super like diehard about this diet.
Now, now how is it killing children?
So looks like a lot of experts are expressing a lot of concern regarding this diet, especially for young babies. He has a new book coming out.
People are trying a diet as such on their children?
Yeah, looks like. It's a new book for babies.
For babies?
For babies,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
specifically for babies.
If you cannot feed dairy to your baby,
yes, you're correct.
How do you feed him proteins?
I'm kind of puzzled about the whole idea. I'm not very
Maybe
sure.
he's like giving shakes, like some protein shakes to the
No, it's
baby,
like
and it
shakes
just
made
becomes
out
like
of
no one knows, and
Hulk
it's
baby.
like, and you know, like caveman diet, so you think that everything's raw, and it's like, does baby really need to?
I wonder how caveman babies ate.
They probably didn't survive that
we
well.
wouldn't be sitting here if caveman babies were prevented all these things.
Yeah, we're not.
I have to say.
So like very strong warnings from health professionals regarding this book. The publisher, Pat McMillan, dumped the project because everyone's like starting to get super concerned. Because it's like one thing to talk about a diet and like talk to adults and tell them, oh, you should kind of try it. And it's a whole different thing like go and give your baby only meat and like deny him other things that supposedly are very important for
him to develop, grow, and survive.
And brain.
And brain, for your brain.
Which maybe he will use later if and looks like his parents didn't use the brain at the time. But
clearly, yeah.
It looks like it. No, so he's like a celebrity chef in Australia. His show, My Kitchen Rules, they're saying like they might dump him from the show after that. Channel 7, it's like a huge hit in Australia. Channel 7 saying that it's just gossip, that they totally encourage his enthusiastic approach regarding the diet. And
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because the only thing that goes through my head right now is Dingo ate my baby.
Looks like that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, Dingo ate my baby.
Yeah, so it looks like, and I mean, I'm totally for your body, and your body healing itself. I'm all for these things, but he keeps on. He has 792,000 fans in his Facebook account, and he keeps on giving this testimonials of like miracles regarding like people that just use the diet and they don't have cancer and they don't have dementia and they So we're not excited about it, and we hope that Pete Evans will not kill your baby.
Amen.
Hopefully.
Moving
on. So 9/11 Museum is starting another controversy. It opened up last May, and there was a huge controversy regarding it because basically the museum was storing the victims' unidentified body parts. So there's a huge controversy. Yeah, there's a huge controversy regarding it from families saying that.
No, I remember the controversy, not specifically that one. I didn't know. Storing them what, on display? No.
So it's in the basement, and it's a type of display, but not really. It's not buried in the sense of like a real. It's not buried in the sense of a
real burial because they don't know who they are.
Exactly. Right. So families were strongly opposing this idea, and now there's a new controversy. Looks like the 9/11 Museum won the award for themed entertainment during a ceremony at Disneyland. Wow. So yes, it's a little too much.
I'm just gonna let that sentence resonate. It's a little too much. It's the whole. I think it's the. How one can say it's the infotainment type, where they look turning grief into entertainment in a very bizarre way.
Absolutely, and the whole idea of like
I know, but it's listen, Roni. I mean, one can also claim things like that about the Yad Vashem Museum, and sometimes in many ways. It's how do you present grief on display? How do you put grief on display for the sake of remembrance? It's a very complicated issue.
It's a very I completely agree, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. The Yad Vashem, the construction camps that are showing the ash of the so I completely agree that there's like a very much fine line, but maybe the most important thing is find a way to not hurt anyone through the process. I think that's the most important thing.
One last one.
So looks like the Reuters Ipsos poll taken this month. They taken a poll this month. Sorry, I can't speak English since I got back from India. And it looks like 54% of Americans held an unfavorable opinion of Obama. So it looks like there's other leaders
are more popular.
Yeah. So
why is there a picture of a?
So then
because that's from 24.
So that's the next thing. Yes, he's from 24. So the next thing was they asked maybe they would like David Palmer from 24 to be their president, and 84% says yes, we will favor.
I would be really concerned with that. You know, if they decided that actually it was it was Underwood from House of Cards.
Oh, they did too. Let me tell you how many people favored Underwood.
I like
57.
Morgan Freeman.
I like Morgan Freeman too. I know.
Yeah, he is good. But 57% also favored Sam Underwood.
Frank Underwood from House of Cards.
So it looks like we're not the only people that may have issues with people in the world of politics.
Ronnie Staff back from India, very zen. Thank you for that cultural look at death and destruction and the Holocaust. As we move to the world of film.
Yes, well, thank you for this transition.
As we move to the world of film, I don't know how you're going to depress me this morning, but let's just see, Lorraine, with what is new in the world of film?
Well, Tom Cruise, which is not new.
But you did mention death, destruction,
but
and
he has an impossible mission again.
No.
To do.
What number is this now?
Number 5. It's called Rogue Nation, and we
have a trailer. But
we have a trailer, and we're
before
going to look at it.
He's becoming like Rocky. It's like the Rocky series.
He's 52 years old.
No, that's
so he's not yet at the.
He's not there at the point. But let's take a look at Mission Impossible number 1700. There we go.
We've never met before, right?
Follow me.
The Syndicate is real. A rogue nation trained to do what we do.
An anti-IMF.
You want to bring down the Syndicate? It's impossible.
Desperate times.
Okay, Ethan, what's the name of the...
Ethan Hunt.
Ethan Hunt, back.
So basically this movie will it will start where Ghost Protocol left off.
Right.
The last Mission Impossible. And for fans, I'm talking to the fans of Tom Cruise, which you're not, apparently. For fans...
I just have issues with his... Yeah, okay, never mind.
Well, we'll talk about it. But for fans, I just want to tell them that if you want to revisit the franchise, Paramount is offering a bonus to those who pre-order tickets to the film this week from 23rd of March to 27th. If they order basically on Rogue Nation tickets on Fandango or movietickets.com, you have the opportunity to download an HD copy of any previous entry in the franchise.
Oh,
that's for the fans.
Okay, that's nice. Does it have to have Tom Cruise on it?
But I think they had Fugees in the background.
The end of the show.
Didn't they have the music in the background? Wasn't it Fugees Ready or Not?
Yes, a remix of the Fugees.
I'm kind of excited about that. Okay, here's one thing to
Ready
get excited about.
I realized that in the past 2 years there've been very, very cool remake of songs in trailers. We've been
sometimes
for Birdman,
better so than
Birdman,
the
for the trailer of Birdman that you adored. There was the Crazy by CeeLo Green.
The Seal and the remakes that they made out of it. It's very true.
Yeah,
okay.
it's been current.
Other than Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. Who's back? Argentinian movie, nothing to do with Tom Cruise. An Argentinian movie that was extremely good. That was called The Secret in Their Eyes. I'm not gonna give you the title in Spanish because I could do it in French, but Spanish I'm gonna pass on that. The movie came out in 2009. It was made by Juan José Campanella, and it was an Academy Award.
Good accent. Okay.
Campanella.
Ooh, yeah.
And it was an Academy Award winning movie for Best Foreign Film. And so it's being remade with Julia Roberts, with Nicole Kidman, Chiwetel Ejiofor. It's a thriller story about this legal counselor that's obsessed not only with a crime that happened 10 years ago, but also with the woman that he used to work with to find out what this crime was about.
I saw the Spanish film. It's an amazing film. It's this trend of, what did they do also? I think it was Vanilla Sky. That was an amazing Spanish film, and then turned it was Spanish. It was a great film, and then it turned into an American movie with Tom Cruise.
Yes, and Penelope Cruz.
That was actually a good film.
Because the
story
the original one was much better.
Was
amazing. Was amazing.
The same thing with actually The Ring, which was a Japanese movie, and they remade as it was a good American film, but when you watch the original,
you're saying like, oh, you ruined it.
Yeah. So anyway, we're expecting good things out of this movie, even though it will bring the attention to the Argentinian one, which is the best thing out of it.
I'm going to go read the original, as they say. Yes.
A news, Independence Day. You remember that movie?
Wow.
With Will Smith. Exactly. The movie that basically kind of threw the career of Will Smith on top of the box office for 20 years. They're going to do the sequel, and they chose Will Smith
They have
will
no
not
more ideas.
Yeah.
Hollywood.
No,
Hollywood is like, we're done.
Well,
we're done here.
We know nothing. We don't know what to do. Yeah.
We talked about it over and over about the sequel, the prequel, the franchise.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. Will Smith will not be back in this movie. They decided to replace him with not Chiwetel Ejiofor, not David Oyelowo, but with Charlotte Gainsbourg.
Well, Charlotte Gainsbourg with a chick.
Well, yeah, Charlotte Gainsbourg. That basically.
I love her.
I love her too.
Yeah.
I can't really see how she is replacing Will Smith. Like, I'm not sure how.
Well,
that's
she's
gonna
taking
work.
a break from the Lars von Trier depressing movies.
Yeah, I was about to say, it was
Fighting aliens sounds way better.
She's gonna kill all the aliens with poetry.
Fantastic accent.
Exactly.
She actually doesn't have an accent. She's British.
She's British.
French-British. She's the daughter of Serge
But
Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin.
Wasn't she also she was the star of this of the soft porn movie of
Antichrist?
No, not Nymphomaniac.
Oh, Nymphomaniac.
Nymphomaniac, exactly. Okay, she can kill the
She
aliens
stars in
with
all
that.
Lars von Trier movies.
Exactly.
Melancholia,
Right,
Antichrist, Nymphomaniac 1, 2. And
maybe
now
this
she's
will
going to kill
catapult.
aliens. And she will play alongside Jeff Goldblum. Which
He's back.
Yeah,
He was
he's
in the
back.
first
And
one.
he
Right.
was this crazy smart scientist with
Right.
sunglasses and glasses. How we remember Jeff Goldblum anyway. But I'm very happy to see him back because I adore Jeff Goldblum and I
Great
think he's
actress.
very
That's
underrated.
right.
She will also play alongside Liam Hemsworth and Jesse Usher.
And now, as the Oscar music is in my ear,
Yes.
girls, it was fabulous to have you in studio, front part of the show. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow morning, I-24 News Morning Edition, the place you should be to start your day every single day, just because you should. Stick around.